There's an awful lot of talk about an animal-based diet, but everything about this way of eating challenges our long-held beliefs about a proper human diet. Too much protein, too much fat, not enough vegetables, overconsumption of dairy. Aren't all these detrimental to your health? Well, I thought the same thing until I transitioned to an animal-based diet. 6 months later, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Literally. The internet is mixed with opinions about an animal-based diet. Spanning the spectrum and labeling it as a detrimental diet to human health, where your common sense should easily steer you away from it, all the way to those that label it as a panacea cure-all approach. Well, today, rather than focus on the technical scientific data, I want to give you a real-world reflection of how an animal-based diet affected not just me, but my entire household. So thanks for clicking on the video today. My name is Arland Hill. I'm a regenerative rancher that helps those that are interested in animal-based products streamline where and how they find those products that they really seek. You might think that a regenerative rancher would be more inclined to eat an animal-based diet. Well, to some degree, that is true, but we were still only consuming what we were producing. And for many years, the focus of animal products in the diet was secondary. We were emphasizing vegetables that we grew in our own garden, but it wasn't until November of 2021 that everything changed in my home. So to help you understand how these changes came about, I'd like to just tell you what happened one morning. So one Saturday morning, my wife and I are sitting at our breakfast table, and she, like many mornings, had prepared some sunny side eggs, and she had some kale sauteed on the side, and there were a few potatoes. And we've sat down to eat. Both of us had taken a few bites off of our plate, and she sits back in her chair and pushes the plate away and says to me, "I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore." And I was like, "What are we talking about?" And she said, "My stomach is hurting again." Well, I didn't want to admit it, but my stomach honestly at that point didn't feel great either. And I said, "Okay, I'm on board with you. I'm not going to push back. We've been emphasizing the vegetables. You know what? Let's go 180 degrees the opposite direction, and let's try carnivore." And long story short, we stuck to carnivore for a couple of weeks, but we pretty quickly started integrating some things back into our diet, fruits and a couple of vegetables. But one thing had noticeably changed in our diet is that we were emphasizing animal products. That was the main emphasis for us, and the fruits and any vegetables that we ate, those things all became secondary to us. Well, take that incident and now fast forward 6 months, and here are 4 things that I have noticed that were significantly different in that first 6 months. Now, I want to tell you, you're going to want to stay around for number 4, because number 4, as I alluded to in the intro, was literally a life changer. Now, let me start off with the first one here. And this one probably won't be that big of a surprise, but I think the level of impact that it had was very noticeable. So the first thing I noticed is that it was much easier for me to gain and maintain muscle, but I also noticed that what was more important to me was that I was able to maintain my strength much easier and recover much easier from my workouts. I've been working out since I was 13 years old, guys, so I've got some experience around this, and my strength in my mid-40s was good, but it wasn't great by any means. And I had started to notice that my recovery just seemed like it was taking longer from workouts that really shouldn't have been that hard. Well, what I noticed is that I started seeing better recovery. So I would create this stimulus. Not only could I go in and do a workout and I could have a better, more productive workout, but I was more recovered the next time I went into workout. And it's very typical to see that as we age, we just don't have that recovery ability, but I was recovering adequately even with going through these heavy, intense workouts. So the reason that that's important to me is, remember, I run and operate a ranch. that's physically demanding. There are a lot of physical things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis, and I want to be where I can go out and physically perform those tasks that I have to every day, to work with the animals, to move things around. And I just felt every day now after that 6 months that I was more physically able to do that. So that was the first big thing that I noticed. The second was that my blood sugar felt more stable. So normally where in the afternoons I would have this dip in energy, this lull, say mid-afternoon. I never was one much for going around and seeking out something to eat, but I just noticed that my energy just wasn't as crisp as it was earlier in the day at that point. Well, after 6 months of being on more of an animal-based diet, that seemed to have alleviated itself. I could now work through literally, I mean, just for example, there's been a couple of days here, we're in hay season right now, and there's been a couple of days here of recent where I've worked through till 8:30 at night just trying to get everything done up until the sun went down, and I was completely fine. I would come in and eat dinner after that. Not my ideal eating pattern, but in the middle of hay season, that's stuff you have to do sometimes. But my blood sugar never dipped, my energy never fell off, and I was able to keep moving forward and be just as productive as at any other time throughout the day. So that was the second big thing that I noticed. Now, the third was related to my gut. Now, let me just say it this way. My gut symptoms seem to have completely disappeared. Now, when I say my gut symptoms, let me be more clear about that. Some of you may have heard the term SIBO, which is just an acronym for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's generally a pattern of gas and bloating shortly after you eat, and it seems to have this very recurrent relapse where you deal with it, you correct maybe you use some things to correct it with, and then over time it comes back and it sets back in. And I did the same thing. I would treat it despite my best combination of antimicrobials, and it would seem to pop back up after 6 to 8 weeks of me having to treat it. And now what I had noticed was that this was the first time at about this 6 month point that it was gone for 6 weeks and it wasn't coming back. And I hadn't seen the relapse of the symptoms like I had been seeing prior. And I'll just share with you one of the things that I attribute this to is that I consume a lot of raw A2 dairy. We have a dairy cow here, and she gets milk twice a day, and we use a lot of her dairy products in our home. I daily consume milk products, dairy products, and when you look at dairy products that are raw, that are A2, but specifically raw dairy here, there's a lot of active compounds in that dairy that are beneficial to our gastrointestinal tract. Helps other areas in the body too, but it's beneficial to our gut. And so my assumption is that with the total increase in animal-based protein as well as those components in the dairy is that I was better able to balance the bacteria in my gut. I was healing up much faster, which is also probably what translates back to what I was sharing with you earlier about my workouts. And I just didn't have the gut symptoms, and that has persisted all the way here into 2024. I just don't have the symptoms related to my gut, the gas, the bloating. As long as my animal-based protein intake stays high, I seem to be doing good with my gut. So to me, that was a huge win because that SIBO condition that I alluded to is notorious for relapsing, and this seems to be something that helped me get past that. Now, that leads us all the way up to number 4, guys, and this is the life changer here, literally. So let me give you a backstory on this one as I share this one with you. My wife and I, at the point that this all took place, had been married around about 7 to 8 years, and we had never gotten pregnant. My wife had no history of oral birth control use, had no history of anything that would have deterred pregnancy. Same in my case. There was no obvious indicators of anything that would have stopped us as a couple from her being able to conceive. And honestly, we had really gotten to the point where we were giving up on being parents. We we're living our life. We had our goals in front of us, and we were just going to move forward with that. But parenting that just wasn't what God had intended for us. It was the way we looked at that. So we accepted that and we moved on. Well, here we are. And you're going to laugh at this because this is another Saturday morning where this literally happened at. So we're sitting down, we're eating breakfast, and we finished breakfast. And normally at that point, what would happen after Saturday breakfast is that we would go out and we would start taking care of the animals. Well, on this particular Saturday, my wife looked over at me and she said, I just don't feel very good. I'm just going to go lay down. I said, hey, go lay down. I know something's up. This is definitely not your norm. I'll go out. I'll get the animals squared away. Don't even think about it. You just rest. Well, I'm out in the pasture taking care of our meat chickens at that point, and my wife comes walking out to the pasture and just has this blank look on her face. And I said in my head, as I saw that blank look, which is not like her, I said to myself, she's pregnant. And lo and behold, the words out of her mouth was, I'm pregnant. And so neither one of us are particularly young in the context of having a child. But what's important, I think, about this is that the only thing that was of any significant change in our lifestyle prior to her becoming pregnant was that both of us had adopted a much higher animal-based protein intake. And when I say animal-based protein, I don't mean that as just focusing on the protein. Obviously, there's fats in there too. There's other nutrients in there. So collectively, this increase in these animal-based foods, so moving us more to an animal-based diet, was the only thing that was of any significant change here. But wow, what a big change for her to become pregnant. And so my take on this is that now there was enough total dietary protein intake, there was enough saturated fat in the diet to assist with the increase in the cholesterol leading on to hormone production. So I think collectively, all of those components that we were getting from that change in the increase in animal-based foods in our diet was really the trigger and the impetus that allowed her to become pregnant, and now for us to have a beautiful son who we get to enjoy, and now we get to be parents. So I share these things with you to say that not that the animal-based diet is really all about, trying to conceive or get pregnant or anything like that. That's not really the point here. It's that the dietary pattern itself seems to be of a nature where when you optimize these animal-based foods in the diet, there's really quite a bit of health components that can be derived from this. So with that in mind, after listening to my experience and what is so much different in our household right now, are you ready to go all in on an animal-based diet? Well, if so, here's another video that'll help you choose the best source of pasture-raised chicken. Oh, and if you live in Southeast Texas, visit HarvestHillsRanch.com, where transparency and facts reign true.